Okay, who of you would like to actually become awake? Can I see like a committed show of hands? Okay, there you go. And who would like more freedom in their life? All right. And who would like more peace, deeper peace? Okay, very good. Thank you. First, I want to acknowledge that you've made the time this afternoon to be here with us. And I know you are busy, you have a lot going on, and so we don't take this for granted. And we'll do everything that is in our power to make it worth your time. I want to start with a little story because there are the important decisions that we do, that we take in our lives, that shape the journey that we end up on. And becoming aware of these decisions is a big deal, and it's an important thing. One decision that I made when I was very young, I was somewhere between 6 and 8, I think, is the decision that I didn't belong here. I was born into a biracial family, multiculturally, from different societies and different races and different eras even. There's a big age difference between my parents. And so every time I met people and I tried to see how I can fit in, I always had the feeling something didn't quite fit. Can you relate to that? Yeah. And so after some time of trying, I came to this conclusion, somehow I just don't fit. So I must not really belong here. And that was an important decision because a lot of things followed that decision. But it wasn't the only decision I made. There was another decision I made a few years later. I watched people argue, and I watched them fight and get into grievances and conflicts. And every time I looked, the message was something was lacking. The reason for all this fighting was because something was lacking. There wasn't enough money. There wasn't enough time. There wasn't enough attention. There wasn't enough awareness. Someone hasn't been aware enough. There wasn't enough love to go around. And so I made a second decision. I made the decision that there wasn't enough. And that decision then began to really shape things, right? And it would have been great if I had stopped there. But once you've made those two decisions, that you don't belong and there's not enough, your mind begins to turn slowly. You become dissatisfied. And so I made a third decision. And I was still a child at that time. I made a third decision. And I made the decision that life is struggle. Life is struggle. And so here I was, without knowing it, having prepared myself wonderfully for a life in samsara, before I was even mature enough to understand what I was doing. But it gave rise to something else. It gave rise to 5 important questions for me. It gave rise to the question, then who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Why am I even here? And why does it matter at all? And I thought these were good questions. And I thought maybe the people around me that had all the say and that were in charge of things and that were important, maybe they had the answers to these questions. And first I approached my parents. That was not the best idea because they didn't actually know. They referred me to other people. And I asked the other people, and most of the answers I got are probably the same answers that you got as well. The answers were, don't ask so many questions. Some of the answers were, just follow along, just go along with the program. Just enjoy yourself, right? Play more or go to school, get a job, find a wife, have some kids, buy a house, get a dog. And then someday, maybe you'll find the answers to these questions. So I kept this in my mind. I said, okay, I have to find someone, there must be someone that knows the answers. And this drive impetus, or let's say this drive that was initiated by the suffering, was the drive that led me to meet the first teachers in my life. Now, I'd like you to think about some of the decisions you made. What were some of the decisions you made about life and about yourself and about other people and about where we are and what is happening and why it is happening and where you're going and why that matters or doesn't matter? Because those decisions that you made, that's where the practice happens. And to own those decisions, and to recognize that those decisions are what has crafted our life and continues to craft our life every day. That is where real Dharma meets real liberation. Do you have some of those decisions? Do you know some of those decisions that you made that caused you to be so excited when you heard the Buddha say the first noble truth, life is struggle? I was like, yes! Finally, someone, right? I thought it was so great when Bob was talking about it, because most of the time when we hear the four noble truths, we hear the one noble truth. That's really what we hear. We reduce the Buddha's teachings to that teaching. When I met the Dharma, it was the first time that I met something that felt right. Didn't feel right to grow up where I grew up, didn't feel right to be with the people I was with, but when I met the Dharma, it felt right. And maybe that was the same thing for you. Maybe you had that experience as well, where you heard the Dharma and it felt right. I met a wonderful meditation master in my early 20s. His name was Gendun Rinpoche, Lama Gendun. He lived in France, where he oversaw a monastery and a retreat center for 3-year retreats. And when I met him, it was the first time I've met a human being that I fully trusted. Another very important thing, one would think that one would have the ability to trust one's parents fully, but there was a certain amount of dysfunction in our home, and I didn't really fully feel that these two adults could be trusted, even though I was aware that they were doing their best. But they had needs and they had fears. So meeting Gendun Rinpoche for me was a turning point, and I moved into the monastery and I stayed 12 years studying with him as a monk, 7 of those years in meditation retreat. Between the age of 27 and 34, I was only in meditation retreat. What happened during the time of study and practice with him was something significantly shifted. Before, I had been a seeker. I'd been someone seeking answers to my questions. Once I had dedicated or decided that I was going to follow this path, I became a finder. I became someone that no longer needed to seek, but it was someone that needed to learn how to find. And that is, believe it or not, a completely different skill. Who here is a seeker? It's okay, you can admit it. Who is a finder? Finding is hard because you have to stay where you are and keep unraveling and uncovering and discovering and not running away anymore at all. Long retreat means stopping to run completely. There's nowhere to run when you're in a long retreat. And it's one thing to be in retreat for 10 days or 10 weeks or a year. But once it's year after year after year, you get really, really used to not running. This was a significant turning point as a practitioner because it opened up something very important that I want to share with you. It opened up the understanding that everything the Buddha taught, without exception, is already here in this room right now, in this moment. All the 84,000 dharmas the Buddha taught, every single teaching, every single sutra, everything about the Abhidharma and all the rules of the Vinaya, all the sutras, all the tantras, everything, Father, Mother, non-dual. It's all here in this room presently now. And learning how to be a finder means that you spend time there where things can be found. That place is the present moment. And to come to a place in your own time and in your own life where you are willing to fully surrender and fully commit to being present, no matter what that means, because you understand that everything you're interested in, everything that will contribute to your liberation, everything that contributes to the liberation of others, and everything that contributes to peace in the world and in yourself is already here. That is a big decision, and a wonderful decision, but a decision with significant consequences. When we are not here, we are in the so-called past, or in the so-called future, or we are in our own delusions, in things that we imagine could be, would be, should be. And our times, our moments that we hear, they are interrupted by moments that we're not here. We call the moments that we hear, we call them meditation practice, 20 minutes a day. The rest of the time, we're somewhere between the past and the future. Shouldn't it be the other way around? Shouldn't we be here and every now and then not here? Like as a little accident? I was just not here for a moment. It was an accident. Because I realized you are all here. Everything the Buddha taught that I'm interested in is here. Everything that causes suffering, everything that liberates from suffering, everything that is the root of suffering, everything that comprises liberation is here. Why would you not want to be here? And yet, there's a lot that makes us not want to be here. There's a lot of feelings, there's a lot of thoughts, there's a lot of behaviors that make us not want to be here. And today, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the aspects of the teachings of the Buddha that can help you, and that certainly help me, relate better to being here. And to relate to this here, now, this present, not from a place of lack, and not from a place of not belonging, but actually from a place of being the place where liberation takes place. The first thing that I want to share with you is the Buddha's teachings on the enlightened body. Our body is in the present. If for many of you this is not new, you're not new to Dharma practice. But our body is always in the present. It actually can't go where our mind goes. And when we are forcing the mind and the body to be split, our body has a lot of tensions, experiences a lot of tensions. And those tensions ultimately cause a lot of stress and then sickness and illness. You may be able to hear from my voice that I have a raspy throat. I have a cold that I caught from my 9-year-old niece that I just spent some days with in Berlin. She was so cute, even though she was sick, and I decided to trade the cuteness over the sickness. And I left with both. Yeah. But I would not trade it back if I could. Yeah. But anyway, what you notice when you're with a little child is that the child's body is very, very loose. And the child's body rests in the present. Now, our body could be very loose, and our body could rest in the present. But our body gets caught up in the narratives of the mind, gets caught up in the decisions of the mind, gets caught up in the wantings and the fears of the mind. And so tensions accumulate. And what I want to offer you is that you develop a relationship with the possibility of the enlightened body as being in the present. we have mirror neurons. There's a lot of science behind how we learn and what we model and who we become. And when you meditate on the Buddha, or you just contemplate the Buddha's body, you contemplate the enlightened body, you contemplate the enlightened dimension of your own body, what could it be to have an enlightened body, a body fully dedicated to being in the present, a body fully dedicated to doing the right things in the present, to acting and expressing that which is wholesome, that which is beneficial for yourself and others in the present, then that begins to become something you will find. It'll begin to become something you will discover because it is already here. The enlightened body is already here. That is why we like being with Dharma teachers, with experienced Dharma teachers, because their bodies are meritorious bodies. Their bodies have less tensions. The Buddha's body had almost none, right? We learn this. We learn there's no karma left in the Buddha. Most of what we perceive about each other is tension. When we are getting a sense of someone, we're getting a sense of their tension. When you meet someone that doesn't have a lot of tension, it's very difficult to make yourself a picture of who they are and what they're about. It's like, I have a hard time getting a read on that person. That's because they don't have a lot of tension. If they have a lot of tension, it's very easy to figure them out, right? Why is that? It's because we're relating to each other based on each other's karma, based on each other's tensions. Meditating and allowing in and relating to the enlightened body means opening up to the possibility of the absence of tension in the present moment in your own body. The second thing is the enlightened speech. The enlightened speech is also here in the present. And you can access that enlightened speech anytime you like. There is this speech, that is the unenlightened speech, which is mainly governed by our own confusion, by our own negativity or strong emotions, conflicting, afflicted emotions. But then there's also the speech that reduces tension, the speech that reduces suffering, the speech that validates someone else's struggle, that makes them feel better, that offers relief, that offers understanding, that offers some wisdom to change direction. And you have access to that speech. That enlightened speech is nobody's property. It is out here for you to relate to mingle your own speech with. There are clear instructions that anyone who understands and has some experience of the Dharma shall share that understanding with those who have the openness to hear it, the openness to listen. Your speech is just as much part of the speech of this world and can just as well become the enlightened speech. The enlightened speech is not owned by someone. The enlightened speech is the expression of wisdom in this world. And the third aspect is the enlightened mind. The enlightened mind is also here in the present. And the enlightened mind is the mind that understands two things. And one could make it complicated, but it isn't. The two things are that there is a perceiver and there is something that is being perceived. And the perceiver has a nature and the perceived has a nature. And to understand those two things is wisdom. And what is obscuring that understanding is the decisions that you've already made about the perceiver and the perceived. the beliefs you already hold, the attitudes you've already developed about the perceiver and the perceived. So when you are practicing and you're dissolving those beliefs, you're dissolving those attitudes, you're dissolving those decisions, you will slowly become familiar with the naked truth of the perceiver and the perceived. What is their true nature? That is wisdom. The teacher that offers you that understanding is what we call a root teacher. Is a teacher that introduces us to the nature of our own mind, the nature of reality. That nature is nowhere else to be found. It is here in the present. The speech that expresses from that understanding is nowhere else to be found. It is here in the present. The body in which that wisdom lives is nowhere else to be found. It is here in the present. And you are in it. You are already part of it. It is not something you can acquire. It is not something I can give you. It is not something anyone can give you. It is only something that you can access when you're willing to relinquish that which separates you from it. And what separates you from it are these obscurations. Some of these obscurations, we call them obscurations of knowledge, and it's something that we think is true when it isn't. Yeah, I thought it was true that I didn't belong. I was wrong. I thought it was true that there wasn't enough. I was wrong about that too. And I thought that I was right and it was true that life was a struggle. And I want to talk about that a little bit more because it is so important that this first initial teaching of the Buddha gets reframed in Dharma circles in the US and really around the world. Because life is struggle, we relate so much easier and so much more to this first truth than the other three. But it's important to know that they are one teaching. They were taught in one sitting, in one teaching. And they are taught in one teaching because they're all present now. All these four truths are a possibility right now, a reality right now. And you have to decide where you're going to place your attention. And the way that you place your attention will lead to your decisions, and your decisions will lead to your attitudes, and your attitudes will lead to your behavior, and your behavior will create that you will predominantly spend your life in the first, the second, the third, or the fourth of these truths. But they're not in the future. And because we learn everything linear, and because we think that progress is linear, then we think that eventually, someday, one day, we will get from this first truth to the fourth truth, but it's going to take a long time, and it's going to be a struggle. I'm offering an alternative to you, and I'd like you to explore that because I was introduced to that by my teachers. The journey is truly a journey of cultivation of wisdom and compassion. But the discovery is that beyond our ideas of separation lie these enlightened body, speech, and mind. When people begin to embody those, and they embody those sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly, we listen. And we feel something. And we get positively influenced. That can happen through a child as much as it can happen through a person that has studied and learned something. When the enlightened speech comes through, you feel it, you know it, right? Have you ever been with a child and the child says something and all the adults are like, whoa, where did that come from? Have you been around that? Yeah. Maybe you've talked to a homeless person who had incredible wisdom to offer, and you wonder, where did that come from? Where did that come from? Where did that person gather that wisdom? No? It is already here. It is always here. It always has been here. It will always be here. The place and the time in which enlightenment can happen will never change. So when I ask you, do you want to awaken? It's an important question, because what is keeping you away from it is not years of practice. What is keeping you away from it is a shift in perspective, and then a commitment to begin to become a finder. This concept of inner wealth, to me, was introduced by a man named the Karmapa, Gyalwa Karmapa. The Karmapas are the heads of the Karma Kagyu lineage, which is one Vajrayana school of Buddhism, dates back to India and then developed in the Himalayas and spread now throughout the world. And I felt very inspired when I heard this concept of inner wealth, because I think it represents everything that I've learned in my years of practicing with awakened beings. Is that this source of wisdom and compassion is not something we have to seek. It is something that we have to acknowledge. And that when we begin to acknowledge it, and we begin to acknowledge it in ourselves, and then we begin to acknowledge it in others, it begins to show up more and more and more and more. I think we're living in a time, as you know, where scarcity and lack are creating a lot of negativity and conflict. And in a time where our sense of belonging is very easy to get lost, or very easy to get segregated into partisan club membership mentality. So in that time particularly, I think these teachings that cut directly through the core and that reintroduce you directly to your own inner wealth, so that you can realize that you do not need to rely on false prophets, or that you do not need to rely on paths that don't bring you the right result. Actually, that you have this option to tap into your own wisdom and become part of the enlightened body, become part of the enlightened speech, and become part of the enlightened mind. There is something magical happening in our time, which is the redefinition of the role of the teacher. And that we are more and more becoming each other's teachers and each other's students. And I hope that my little talk today will contribute to you deepening your relationship to the enlightened body, speech, and mind, and to the wealth, the inner wealth that represents, and that you will become a better student and also a better teacher to those around you. So we have a little bit of time for Q&A, and I want to see whether there are some questions that you have. Yes, please.
I've had a lifetime of seemingly one struggle after the next, with some periods of less and some periods of more. So I'm always on that path of seeking, as you said. But at the same time, a lot of those struggles have added up to the person that I am standing before you right now. And most of it's pretty darn good, you know, people would say, and I feel good about it. So how do you address that? And I mean, how do I look at that as, you know, was it a bad decision or not a bad decision at the time?
Think of it like someone crossing an ocean, right? And they need the motivation, they need the impetus to embark on their journey. And then they need the vessel, they need the boat to cross the journey. But once they're on the other side, and you see them walking around with the boat on their head, schlepping the boat around, you'd want to remind them that it has served its purpose.
I like that. Thank you.
right? So those things that made you struggle to crack the egg open and to find life, they have served their purpose.
Hi, I'm your
Hi.
sister. I've always felt I didn't belong, had enough, and struggled. And so I'm so glad to find you. And I would love you to talk more. I'm so much a seeker. So I'd love you to expand on the finder role, which I'm unfamiliar with.
Yes, yeah. The finder role begins by looking at what it is that you are chasing. And then begin to look. Here's a little secret. What you are chasing is also what you're running away from. And so begin to look at where that is actually already present in your life. Maybe you're looking for more kindness and you overlook the love your dog has for you because you have no time, because you have to be somewhere, for example. Or you'd like more patience, but it's very difficult for you to take a moment and just enjoy a cup of tea or something, right? So we actually are looking for the things that at the same time we are ignoring. Yes, begin there. Yes, yeah. Begin to direct your awareness to the very thing you think is not there. Yes, it cannot be anywhere else. Like I said, everything actually is here and now. You have always been here now. When you were a year old, you were here now. When you were 10 years old, you were here now. By the time you'll be 90, you'll be here now. When you think about the past, you're doing it in the here and now. When you are imagining the future, you're doing it in the here and now. Whether you understand that or not will be a significant turning point in your life. And whether or not you'll allow yourself to be at peace and to enjoy your life. Because truly everything is already here for you. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
This idea of this present moment, which obviously we're all striving for here today probably, it works so well when we're sitting here and we're listening to your words of wisdom and thinking about how we can apply those to our lives. And then we walk out of here and we're, at home with a family member who just says something appalling or is mean, or you don't agree with their values or their way of being, and you're saying, okay, what is, sort of the Buddhist response to this? And, I find myself sort of just mani padme humming myself through the conversation in my head to sort of avoid getting aroused by, these things that I don't like. And I realize that's not really the right approach, but it's so hard in the day-to-day and trying to apply these principles and beliefs and way of being in a very imperfect, laboratory of life with things that come up all the time and are really hard to manage in the present moment.
Yes. It is practice, right? So it is practice, but the thing is with practice, the hardest practice is always the first practice. So whatever it is you're practicing today, today's the hardest day. Tomorrow will be a little easier. Day after a little easier. Day after a little easier. That's the incredible thing with practice. Practice gets easier. The other option gets harder. Right? Avoiding gets a little bit harder today than it was yesterday. Right? Escaping a little bit harder today than it was yesterday, right? So this is why this is so important. We are all practitioners, no? And we work with these situations. Part of why we have a lot of difficulties in our world is because we have a lot of collateral damage, unwanted consequences. Yeah. The driver behind these unwanted consequences is desire, avoidance, or resentment and ignorance. But the consequences are not wanted. They're unwanted consequences. So we are experiencing a decline in the quality of our presence and in the quality of our relationship in the present, because we're trying to get to a better future faster. So when you're with someone and you have a conflict with someone, what can you do to improve the present? And sometimes that step is a step back, and sometimes that step is a step forward. Sometimes that means listening. Sometimes that means saying something. But rather than saying, how can I avoid the present, this unpleasant situation, and how can I try to say something that'll get me to a future faster? Yeah. How can I actually say something that will improve the present? Does that make sense? Try that. Yeah? Try that. 2 more questions. Right here, the gentleman.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for your presence. I'm really loving this. I'm drinking it in.
I'm glad. I'm just sharing what I have received.
Right. Yeah, I know it's very felt. So you talked about that we have this power, this ability as to where we place our awareness and our focus. And what are the key modalities that are ones that you offer your students or can offer us here today? Is it the breath? Is it meditation? Is it this reframing that you talked about? Just open to guidance on that that gift I have to either put my attention on my hell or on my bliss.
Yes.
Or on simply what is.
Yes. Well, they are all present. The struggle is present. The origin of the struggle is present. The end of the struggle is present, and the path out of to the end is also present. Each of those. We're talking about methods. The Buddha taught a lot of methods, and these methods can be divided into listening, reflecting, and meditating, or into concentration, wisdom, and behavior. Yeah. But they're very actually dealing just with the human being. Everything you need, you came with, and you came naked. So everything you need to follow the Buddhist path, you brought with you. All the stuff you acquired is nice and comfortable, but you don't really need it to practice. What you need to practice is your own body, your own mind, and your own speech. So the tools you learn to develop meditation, these are tools that help you become present, like meditation on the breath, meditation on an object, meditation on the form of the Buddha, meditation on a flower, meditation on a sound, meditation on a scent. Right? Anytime you relate to the human body and you meditate on anything in relationship with the human body, you become present because the human body is in the present. You meditate on a smell, you're more present. On a sound, you're more present. On a taste, you're more present. Because anything related to the body will bring you in the present. Eventually, you learn to absorb not only the 5 senses, but the 6th one, mental sense, which is thought. And you begin to be able to observe thought as a form of meditation. And then you begin to go further and begin to investigate, where does thought originate? Where does thought disappear to? What is the nature of thought? And that will move you from simply cultivating stability into actually cultivating insight, which is a deeper penetration of observation. These are some of the techniques. Yeah, you need to learn how to be present. That is a really important skill because the finding happens in the present. So the more time you can spend in the present, the more time you can spend finding. And then the easiest way to find is to work with a teacher who will help you where to look. Like I said, I was very curious when I was very young, but it took years to know where to look. I needed the guidance of qualified teachers to show me where to look. And I think that is something you can really benefit from when you are working with teachers. They'll if you decide you are going to be a finder, then find a good teacher that'll help you where to look. And most of the teachers that are here, they can help you. They can cut that short. You just have to make the decision not to postpone it. That's why I said, who's ready? Who wants to? Because the moment you can fully commit yourself to that, really, and you can raise your hand and you can say, the time is now, and I'm ready, and I want this, and I'm willing to shift, then you can begin this process of turning into a finder. Because, like I said, it's already here. You're carrying it with you all the time. Is that helpful?
Yeah, and I feel like I'm both.
Yes, we are. Yes. Okay. Last question. Yes.
This is in response to the first question about suffering and then the choices we make that lead to suffering.
Yes.
And you had mentioned the boat and carrying the boat when it no longer serves us.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody else has ever experienced this, but have you ever had where you just kind of keep attracting the same situation over and over into your life in different forms, in different places?
Yes.
And why does that happen? And
yes.
What do you do about it, I guess?
Yes. Yes. So it happens because you are learning a lesson that you haven't learned fully yet. Yeah. Everything that we're experiencing in our life is a direct reflection of our thoughts, our attitudes, our imagination, our words, and our actions. Everything. And when you are experiencing a situation over and over again, that means that there is something within your behavior, whether that is mental, emotional, or verbal or physical behavior, that is recreating that experience. Now, I'm saying recreating because we're not always perceiving situations clearly. I can feel disappointed 10 times a day, even though maybe nothing happened. So recreating an experience doesn't mean it actually happened. But I experienced it. Have you ever had an experience where you made an assumption and you got disappointed based on an assumption and then you learned it wasn't even true? Right? So we can recreate an experience all on our own. Okay? And what is important is that you investigate and you look at what are the beliefs you hold, what are the emotions around those beliefs, and what are the actions you take in your thoughts, in your words, and in your physical actions that reinforce that pattern. Okay? And if it's difficult for you to see it, ask the people that know you well. And ask them, what do you see that I keep doing that is leading to these results? And they know you well. They'll say, I'm glad you asked. I didn't feel like, I didn't want to intrude. But here and here, you want to stop that, right? Like you have wisdom around you. You're just not accessing it necessarily. So that would be my recommendation. Yeah, if you'd like to tell me more after, you can. But otherwise, I'd say turn to your close friends and family and really observe your behavior. And the hardest behavior to observe is the mental behavior. Mental behavior is when a thought that arises becomes a chain of thoughts, becomes a thought process, rather than just thinking, oh, this could be like this. You say, it could be like this. Actually, it is like this. Oh, I really don't like that. It is like this. And so it becomes a thought chain. That is called mental behavior. That's the hardest to observe and the hardest to change. But it has the most far-reaching consequences because naturally, if that changes, everything else changes as well. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.